For Black families scraping by in the 1980s, every food choice was a calculation between hunger and heritage. As inflation soared and supermarkets fled their neighborhoods, what did it take to stretch a dollar, keep a family fed, and pass on tradition when the shelves were nearly empty? This is the unfiltered truth behind the foods you thought you knew. A 20-pound bag of rice sat in the corner of nearly every pantry, a quiet promise that no matter how lean the week, there would be something on the table. At 50 cents a pound, rice was a lifeline. Families would boil up a big pot, sometimes with just a spoonful of meat gravy poured over the top. Even a single chicken leg could stretch to feed 5 or 6 when served with enough rice. Every grain counted. Grits came in bulk too, big sacks that lasted for weeks. Breakfast meant a steaming bowl of grits, maybe with a pat of margarine or a sprinkle of sugar if the budget allowed. Some mornings, grits were the only thing between a child and an empty stomach before school. The beauty of grits was in their simplicity. They filled bellies without emptying wallets, and the leftovers could be fried up for lunch or dinner the next day. Cornmeal was another staple, always in the cabinet, ready to become skillet cornbread at a moment's notice. Lucille, the family matriarch, had a trick for making a little cornmeal go a long way. She would mix in a handful of flour, a splash of powdered milk, and whatever bacon grease she had saved in a coffee can by the stove. The batter sizzled as it hit the hot skillet, filling the kitchen with a smell that meant home. Cornbread was not just a side, it was a way to turn beans or greens into a meal that felt complete. Leftover cornbread never went to waste. It could be crumbled into a glass of buttermilk for a late-night snack or packed into a lunch pail. Bulk buying was more than a cost-saving measure. It was an act of foresight, a hedge against the uncertainty of paychecks that might not stretch to the end of the month. With rice, grits, and cornmeal on hand, families could multiply small amounts of meat and vegetables into hearty meals. Each bag, each skillet, each pot told a story of making do, of turning the most basic ingredients into something that filled more than just the stomach. In kitchens across the country, these grains were the foundation of survival and celebration alike. Oatmeal packed in those tall, round cardboard cylinders was a morning essential for families trying to stretch every dollar. A single container could last weeks if rationed right, scooped out in careful portions each dawn. Hot oatmeal wasn't just filling, it offered a blank canvas. Some mornings it was sweetened with a little sugar or a drizzle of syrup if those luxuries were on hand. Other times it went plain, maybe with a splash of canned milk or a pat of margarine. The real power of oatmeal was its staying power. It kept kids full through long school days and could be reheated for an afternoon snack with just a bit of water added back in. Flour came in big sacks, usually 5 or 10 pounds, tucked away in cupboards or even under the sink. It was the backbone of homemade biscuits, pancakes, and gravy, meals that could be whipped up with just a few other ingredients. Lucille, always up before sunrise, would cut shortening into the flour with her hands, working quickly so the dough stayed cold. Her biscuits were soft inside, golden on top, and never lasted long. She'd say, "If you got flour and a little lard, you got breakfast." Biscuits paired with thick gravy stretched a pound of sausage or a bit of bacon across the whole table. Sometimes flour meant fried bread or dumplings dropped into bubbling pots of beans. White bread, soft and cheap, was a fixture on the kitchen counter. The store-brand loaves came wrapped in clear plastic, stacked high at the market, always on sale. Sandwiches were built on white bread, peanut butter, bologna, or whatever was available. Toasted, it became a quick breakfast or a side for stews. When the loaf started to go stale, it found new life as bread pudding or bread crumbs. Nothing was wasted. Bulk grains like oatmeal and flour weren't just about saving money, they were about making sure no one went hungry. Families learned to store flour in cool, dry places, sometimes even in the fridge to keep away bugs. Oatmeal and flour could be traded with neighbors or borrowed in a pinch. Each item in the pantry had its own tricks and secrets, passed down from one generation to the next. Lucille's voice still lingers in the air. Biscuits ain't nothing but flour and love, baby. With these grains on hand, the table was never truly empty. They built the base for nearly every meal, carrying families through lean times and Sunday gatherings alike. The next challenge came in finding enough protein to go with them, but with oatmeal, flour, and bread, the foundation was always set. Peanut butter sat heavy in the jar, thick and sticky, ready to be spread on white bread or scooped straight onto a spoon. The big generic jars lasted weeks and nobody cared if the label was plain. For families with tight budgets, peanut butter was protein you didn't have to cook, and it went further than meat. Some mornings it got swirled into hot oatmeal for extra staying power. Other days, a spoonful melted into grits or was mixed with a little honey and powdered milk for a sweet, filling treat. Kids would come home hungry from school and go straight for the jar, dipping crackers or just licking the knife clean. The empty jar itself never went to waste. Lucille saved them for storing bacon grease or homemade jam. Bologna came wrapped in red plastic, stacked in thick slices behind the deli counter, or found in the cheapest section of the fridge aisle. It was always on sale, and a single pack could stretch through a week of lunches, sliced thin for sandwiches, or fried up in a skillet until the edges curled. Bologna was a familiar sight. The smell of frying bologna meant lunchtime, the fat sizzling and popping, sometimes with a slice of onion thrown in for flavor. On Sundays, it might be diced into scrambled eggs or layered with cheese for a sandwich that felt almost fancy. Even the red ring, peeled off before frying, was a small ritual. Kids would dare each other to eat it, but most just tossed it aside. Bologna was reliable, cheap, and filling. A way to put something hearty between two slices of bread when money was tight. Government cheese arrived in 5-pound blocks inside plain cardboard boxes, handed out at churches or community centers under the temporary emergency food assistance program, which started in 1983. The cheese was dense and orange, sliced thick for sandwiches, or grated over grits. For grilled cheese, it melted slow and gooey, turning a few cents worth of bread into a hot meal that stuck to your ribs. Marcus, the oldest son, had a knack for getting the cheese to melt just right. He would stack slices between bread, press the sandwich in a cast iron skillet, and weigh it down with a plate. The cheese bubbled out the sides, crisping on the pan. Some families made macaroni and cheese with it, or stirred cubes into pots of beans for extra flavor. People joked about the taste, salty and a little bland, but nobody turned it down. Government cheese meant dinner was covered, at least for a few nights. These three, peanut butter, bologna, and government cheese, were the anchors of protein in a world where meat was expensive and never guaranteed. Each had its tricks and hacks, passed down and improved over time. Whether spread, fried, or melted, they turned simple grains and bread into meals that filled bellies and brought everyone to the table, no matter how lean the week. Hot dogs came in packs of 8 or 12, stacked at the end of the meat aisle, always on special. The cheapest brands ran less than $1, sometimes even 2 packs for $1.50 if you caught the right sale. Families boiled them for quick lunches or fried them in a pan until the skin split, then tucked them into slices of white bread instead of buns. For some, hot dogs were the main event in Saturday stews, sliced thin and simmered with canned tomatoes, onions, and a pinch of whatever seasoning was left. The sodium content was very high, but nobody read the label. Hunger came first. Vienna sausages, packed tight in those small silver cans, lined pantry shelves for months. At about 25 cents a can, they were a dependable backup when meat money ran out. The pop of the lid released a sharp, briny smell, 6 or 7 little links floating in salty broth. Some folks ate them straight from the can, others chopped them up with eggs or stirred them into rice. Vienna sausages did not pretend to be fancy, but they filled a hole and kept kids from going to bed hungry. Chicken backs were the unsung heroes of the butcher's case. At just 39 cents a pound, they were the cheapest cut in the store, piled high in plastic wrap trays. Most shoppers passed them by, but families who knew how to stretch a dollar saw possibility. Marcus, who learned from his grandmother, would drop chicken backs into a big pot with onions, celery, and whatever spices he could find. He let it simmer low and slow, coaxing out every bit of flavor and fat. The broth turned rich and golden, perfect for pouring over rice or grits. Once the meat fell off the bone, it went back into the pot for soups or was picked clean and mixed into dumplings. A single tray could feed a crowd if you knew how to stretch it. None of these proteins tasted like steak or Sunday roast, but they were steady. Hot dogs, Vienna sausages, and chicken backs were cheap, filling, and easy to prepare in big batches. They kept the grocery bill in check, and the family fed meal after meal. The sodium and fat might have worried a doctor, but in those days, the only thing that mattered was making sure everyone had enough to eat. The next challenge waited on a different aisle, where canned goods offered their own kind of security. Canned vegetables filled entire shelves in kitchens where every penny mattered. The labels were plain, just black letters on a white background. No cartoon mascots, no promises of freshness. Green beans, sweet corn, peas, and sometimes carrots, all stacked in neat rows. A can of generic green beans might cost 29 cents, sometimes less if you caught a sale at the corner store. Name brands sat on separate shelves, but most families reached for the cheapest cans in the aisle, knowing it would taste just as good once seasoned right. Collard greens too came in cans, ready to be simmered with a bit of bacon grease or a ham hock if there was one left in the freezer. The aroma of canned greens cooking on the stove became a sign that dinner was coming together, even when fresh produce was out of reach. Canned collards brought the taste of Sunday dinners to any night of the week, stretching the flavor of whatever meat was on hand. Some families swore by adding a splash of vinegar or a pinch of sugar to brighten up the taste. Powdered milk was a pantry regular, tucked behind the cans and brought out when the real thing ran out. A box of powdered milk could last a month, mixed with water for cereal, baking, or just to lighten up a cup of coffee. Kids complained about the taste, calling it chalky or thin, but it got the job done. For many, fresh milk was a luxury, saved for the youngest children or special occasions. Powdered milk, on the other hand, was always there, stirred into cornbread batter, poured over oatmeal, or used to stretch a can of evaporated milk for Sunday desserts. Samir, who ran the corner store on the block, kept his shelves stocked high with these cans, knowing they'd move fast on payday. He'd say, "You want to eat every day, you buy the cans." He watched families come in with lists, counting coins, choosing 5 cans over 2 to make sure there'd be enough for the week. Sometimes he'd throw in an extra can for a regular, especially if he knew they were short that month. Seasoning was the secret weapon. Plain canned vegetables could taste like anything you wanted with the right mix of salt, pepper, onion powder, or a dash of hot sauce. A can of corn became cream corn with a little margarine and sugar. Green beans simmered with bouillon cubes, and a few slices of onion tasted like they had been cooked all day. Even powdered milk could be stirred into mashed potatoes or pancake batter to make them richer. Families learned to work magic with what they had, turning the simplest cans into meals that felt like home. Pantry anchors were not just about filling bellies, they were about flavor, tradition, and making do. Every can, every box of powdered milk told a story of stretching dollars and keeping family recipes alive, even when times were hardest. Canned tomatoes held a permanent spot on the pantry shelf, their bright red color promising flavor even in the dead of winter. A single can could start a pot of soup, stretch a stew, or become the base for a quick spaghetti dinner. When fresh vegetables were out of reach, canned tomatoes brought a taste of summer back to the table. They simmered with onions and spices, filling the kitchen with a tangy aroma that signaled something hearty was on the way. Even a plain pot of rice or grits gained new life with a spoonful of tomato sauce stirred in. Canned salmon, though pricier than other options, was a special purchase that families made stretch across several meals. The pink meat, packed with tiny bones and skin, became the heart of homemade croquettes. Lucille would mash the salmon with breadcrumbs, chopped onions, and a beaten egg, then shape the mixture into patties and fry them until crisp. Croquettes were more than just a meal. They were a tradition passed down from elders who knew how to turn a single can into a Sunday dinner for a crowd. Samir remembered how quickly they disappeared at church potlucks, the platter empty before the prayer was finished. For many, salmon croquettes were a taste of home and a reminder that even on a tight budget, celebration was possible. Dried beans, sold in 1-pound bags for less than $1, offered endless possibilities. Black-eyed peas, pintos, navy beans, each type brought its own flavor and story. Beans soaked overnight and simmered slowly became the main event in pots of stew, paired with cornbread or poured over rice. A single bag could feed a family for days, especially when seasoned with a ham bone or a handful of smoked turkey scraps. Beans did not just fill bellies, they brought everyone to the table, sparking conversation and laughter that lasted long after dinner was done. Leftovers found new life in lunches, mashed and spread on bread, or stirred into soups with whatever vegetables were left in the cupboard. Canned mackerel sometimes joined salmon on the shelf, chosen for its lower price and similar use in patties or stews. Families swapped recipes, each claiming their own version tasted best. The pantry's protein section was rounded out by these shelf-stable cans and bags, making sure that even when fresh meat was scarce, no one left the table hungry. Soup bases, whether made from a can of tomatoes or a handful of beans, formed the backbone of countless meals. They allowed cooks to stretch scraps and leftovers into something that felt complete. With the right mix of canned goods and dried staples, families built meals that carried the taste of tradition even when money was tight. The pantry, stocked with these anchors, offered comfort and possibility, a quiet assurance that, no matter what, there would always be something warm to eat. Cornbread mix was a weeknight hero tucked behind flour and sugar on the pantry shelf. The box cost less than $1, and in 15 minutes it could turn a pot of beans or a bowl of greens into a meal that felt like Sunday dinner. Some families added a spoonful of sugar or a splash of canned milk for extra richness, but even plain, that golden crust brought everyone to the table. Leftover cornbread never lingered long. Crumbled into buttermilk, it became a late-night treat, or it was packed into lunch boxes for the next day. Generic cereal lined the top shelf in the kitchen, always in bags bigger than the name brands. The price difference mattered. Store-brand cornflakes or puffed rice could cost half as much as the boxes with cartoon mascots. Parents measured out careful portions each morning, stretching one bag through the week. Some kids ate it dry, straight from the bag, while others poured on powdered milk or whatever was left in the jug. Tasha, the youngest, liked to trade snack-sized baggies of cereal at school, swapping for cookies or chips when she could. Cereal was more than breakfast, it was currency in the lunchroom, a way to get something sweet when money was tight. Sloppy Joes brought a little excitement to the dinner table. A can of Libby's mix or a packet of seasoning, a pound of ground beef if you had it, and a loaf of white bread were all it took. The sauce stretched a small amount of meat, making enough to fill every sandwich. On nights when there wasn't any meat, some families just used the sauce over rice or noodles. The tangy smell filled the house, and for a moment, dinner felt like a treat. Kids wiped plates clean with the last slice of bread, hoping for seconds. Ramen noodles were the ultimate after-school snack. 10 packs for $1 meant there was always a stash in the cabinet. The 3-minute boil was all it took. Noodles, a packet of salty seasoning, and a bowl. Some days a slice of hot dog or a handful of frozen peas got tossed in, but most of the time it was just plain ramen, quick and hot. At 10 cents a serving, ramen filled bellies fast and kept the grocery bill down. Older siblings taught the younger ones how to doctor up the broth, adding a dash of hot sauce or a sprinkle of onion powder. Ramen was reliable, cheap, and always ready when hunger struck between school and dinner. Each of these quick sides and snacks offered more than convenience. They were proof of resourceful cooking, turning a few coins and a little creativity into meals that stuck with you. Whether it was cornbread with beans, cereal at dawn, or a steaming bowl of ramen after school, these foods brought comfort, filled gaps, and made sure no one went without. Macaroni was a weeknight lifesaver, tucked into almost every shopping cart. The cheapest elbow noodles came in blue and white boxes, sometimes just a quarter each. A single box could feed a table full of kids when tossed with a little margarine or a cube of government cheese. On special occasions, macaroni turned into baked casseroles, bubbling and golden on top. Most nights it was boiled plain, drained, and mixed with whatever was left in the fridge. The trick was making it creamy enough to feel comforting, even if the only dairy came from powdered milk or a spoonful of margarine. Margarine itself became a kitchen staple when butter prices soared. The big yellow tubs, often store brand, could be found in every fridge. It spread easily on toast, melted into grits, or slicked the bottom of a skillet for frying eggs. Moms knew how to stretch a single tub through the week, scraping every last bit from the corners. Margarine wasn't just a substitute, it was the flavor behind so many meals, giving oatmeal, vegetables, and cornbread a little richness when nothing else was available. The price made it a necessity, always cheaper than butter, and just as useful for baking, frying, or finishing off a pot of beans. Kool-Aid packets, stacked by the register for 10 cents a piece, were the drink of choice in most homes. A single packet, a cup of sugar, and a full pitcher of water could serve the whole family for days. The flavors cherry, grape, and orange became part of the soundtrack of summer. Tasha, the youngest, loved being in charge of mixing the Kool-Aid, careful to stir until every grain of sugar disappeared. Some families kept a special pitcher just for Kool-Aid, and the bright colors stained plastic and lips alike. On hot afternoons, a glass of Kool-Aid was as close as it got to having dessert with dinner. The ritual of making it, from tearing open the packet to pouring the first glass, brought a sense of celebration, even when money was tight. These groceries, macaroni, margarine, and Kool-Aid offered more than calories. They brought comfort and a sense of normalcy to the table. They made it possible to turn whatever was left in the pantry into something warm and familiar. Even when the fridge was nearly empty, a box of macaroni and a pitcher of Kool-Aid meant that family could gather, laugh, and share a meal that felt like more than just survival. In kitchens across the country, these simple foods became the backdrop to stories, memories, and moments of joy that lasted long after the dishes were cleared. In 1983, Black unemployment reached nearly 20%, a rate more than double that of white workers. For families already living on the edge, every lost job meant another week of stretching groceries just a little further. At the same time, inflation had pushed food prices higher than many could remember. In 1980, the cost of living jumped over 13%, and paychecks simply did not keep up. A 5-pound bag of rice or a can of green beans cost more with each passing month, even as wages stagnated or disappeared entirely. Dr. Angela Price, who grew up on Chicago's West Side, still remembers her mother making careful calculations at the corner store. Her mother would say, "We would go in with $2 and a list. You would get what you could and hope the prices had not gone up since last week." For many, the nearest supermarket was no longer an option. In 1981, A&P announced it would close all 42 of its Chicago stores, completing the shutdown by the following year. These were not just any stores, they were the last affordable options within reach for entire neighborhoods. When the doors locked for good, families lost not only a place to shop, but jobs, community ties, and the little bit of price competition that kept groceries within reach. The disappearance of major chains forced families to rely on corner stores and small grocers, where prices were higher and choices fewer. Canned goods and bulk staples became even more essential, not just for their price, but for their shelf life and versatility. Store shelves in Black neighborhoods filled with generics and off-brand labels, plain white cans stacked high where produce used to be. Shoppers learned to navigate weekly sales, double coupon days, and whatever deals could be found, but the math was always tight. $1 bought less each year, and the lines at government food distributions grew longer. These economic pressures shaped every shopping trip. The grocery cart was a map of survival, filled with items that could stretch across meals and days. When supermarkets left, the landscape changed. Families adapted, but the cost was more than just higher prices. It meant fewer fresh foods, less variety, and a constant calculation: how to keep everyone fed when the rules kept changing. The foods that filled the table were shaped as much by the economy as by tradition, a reflection of resilience in the face of shrinking choices. Food companies in the 1980s knew exactly where to aim their ads. Brightly colored boxes, catchy jingles, and cartoon mascots crowded the airwaves and store shelves, all promising more for less. But behind the promise of convenience and low prices, there was a strategy. Brands like Kraft, General Mills, and Nissan poured money into marketing campaigns that targeted low-income neighborhoods, pushing products that were cheap to buy and easy to prepare. Generic cereals in oversized bags, instant noodles, and processed cheese became household names, not because of their nutrition, but because they filled bellies for pennies. Dr. Renee Cole, a dietitian who grew up watching her neighbors fill carts with these staples, remembers how the marketing worked. She points out that many of the foods pushed hardest in Black communities were loaded with sodium, sugar, and fat. The labels rarely told the full story. A single serving of ramen or canned vegetables could pack in half a day's worth of salt. Margarine and processed meats brought saturated fat to the table, but the risks were buried under slogans about value and taste. Health consequences crept in quietly. High blood pressure, diabetes, and heart disease rates rose in communities where fresh food was scarce and processed options were everywhere. Doctors and nutritionists warned about the dangers, but for families choosing between hunger and a hot meal, those warnings felt distant. The real cost of these cheap groceries did not show up at the register, it showed up years later in doctor visits and prescriptions. The marketing machine did not just sell food, it shaped habits. Kids grew up craving the sweetness of powdered drink mixes or the salty bite of canned meats. Advertising tied these products to happiness, family, and even pride in making do. But the long-term effects, hidden in fine print in small numbers, revealed a different legacy. Dr. Cole remembers that families did not have the luxury of worrying about sodium or sugar. They worried about getting through the week. The story of these groceries is about more than survival. It is about the ways corporate strategy and health trade-offs became woven into daily life, leaving families to balance the comfort of familiar foods with the hidden costs that came with every bite. Food deserts still affect millions of Black families in the United States today, with over 17% of Black households experiencing food insecurity. The legacy of limited choice and structural barriers persists, shaping health and opportunity right now. Every grocery aisle tells a story of resilience, but also of a system still in need of change. The struggle for fair access to food is far from over. Share your thoughts and experiences below.